Hey guys, so this week we're starting with our new novel, Frankenstein. I just wanted to pop in with a couple of quick comments about this reading as we are moving on in our course. First, I wanted to remind you guys to make sure that you are annotating while you're reading, always. And I wanted to show you quickly what some of my annotations look like. Now, granted, I do have the hard copy of the book, but even if I didn't, I would just be kind of jotting my notes down on paper, or if you prefer using the computer, you could be typing in your notes as well as your reading. I like to do little tabs up at the top here to kind of help outline what I should be trying to read each week. We know this is a little bit longer of a work here, so we need to make sure we're preparing ourselves and planning out the reading accordingly so that we can enjoy the reading, of course. You always want to enjoy it. And then you'll notice as well, too, that my annotations look something similar to, and remember, you can do this various ways. I like to just jot down a lot of notes onto the side of mine. I like to underline and circle anything as well. That's just the way I do it. I know some people like to use highlighters, some people like to use different color ink, just whatever works for you. Some things that I like to do immediately whenever I'm reading is definitely note what tone I'm hearing or feeling right away. Remember that that's the mood that's happening in the work. You'll probably see that on this week's quiz. What tone are you hearing right away? So I always jot that. I also always jot down what's happening with one of the main characters as I'm reading and how that's paralleling one of the main themes that I'm seeing immediately. Again, these are all those literary terms that are in some of the documents that I've shared with you guys thus far in our course. For example, I know right here, I feel like immediately in this first letter, I'm hearing this idea of kind of wanting something new, this idea of searching for some sort of discovery, some sort of adventure, something somewhat kind of beyond the average man in a sense, so that I'll kind of jot down what I'm hearing as a character trait kind of happening, which usually again would parallel some sort of theme. I notice right away I'm kind of hearing this idea of pride, this talking about confidence and the success of my undertaking, so I can hear or feel or sense this additional theme of pride happening as well, this self-assurance, remembering that there's always going to be multiple themes in a work, which is always a good thing because that means that no matter what it is we're reading, you should be able to find something within the reading that you're interested in or that you're connecting to. Because again, remember, like I've said before, we're never reading these kind of dead pieces of work in a sense. We're reading great books, hence the title of the class, Great Books, right? And so when Frankenstein was first given to us, in the 1800s, what was it? 1818 was the first publication. So when this is first kind of given to us, it was considered a great, book of its time, and it's considered a great book of our time still, so many years later. So us questioning how is it that we have this novel, this work of art that ends up standing some sort of test of time in a sense because it contains all of these universal themes. This idea that just the word Frankenstein itself has had so many adaptations in current society. In fact, and one of our videos says this as well, and some of the notes also in the beginning of the module, which you should always look at before you're starting any of the work, of course, because it gives us that great foundational context. Before we start reading, all those notes is what helps give us some of the depth to the reading. But one thing you'll see, and you probably realize this if you've started reading, is that currently today when we hear that word Frankenstein, we think that we're referring to the actual monster. However, that's not the case. Frankenstein is actually the name of Victor Frankenstein, the creator of the monster. So we have this ironic kind of morphing of this iconic character of Frankenstein and then also the monster, and how in today's time it's kind of morphed to mean so many different things, and how fascinating that is in of itself. And so with that said, that ties into this idea that we read critically and in depth and with the annotations because we're always trying to consider what the novel looks like to me in my world, to my personal engagement. I'll always note that as well. That's what I'm always searching for whenever I'm reading is how is this speaking to me on a personal level? That's how I'm getting that critical thinking happening beyond just these words on a page. So one thing I noticed right away too is this idea of pride again, right? We talked about pride on that very first page. I could sense this pride happening within the primary voice of the character thus far. And then I see again this idea of pride, this where he says, I became a poet, and for 1 year I lived in a paradise of my own creation. I imagined that I might obtain a niche in the temple where the names of Homer and Shakespeare are consecrated. So, this idea that I want to be remembered for something, right? That's what we're hearing from this main character. And isn't that universal? Don't we all have those feelings where we want to be remembered for something? We want to do something important in our lives. Even though that importance would look so different between all of us, we're wanting to do something. Today, I feel like it's kind of that 15 minutes of fame that we kind of hear about. That kind of parallels this idea of fame and fortune. It might look different to us, but it's a universal theme that we're all seeking in some way. And it's the same thing that I hear here is this idea that always this pride is driving us in a sense. And so I hear that this desire to, universal desire here too, of this idea that we want to answer these secrets. I want to know the unknown. I want to explore the unseen. I want to maybe know those secrets that man is or is not supposed to know. I'm not really sure. I mean, that's kind of those universal questions, and that's what we hear immediately happening in here, and that parallels to today as well. You can think of so many different topics in today's time that would parallel this idea of pride, of secrets, of fate versus free will. That should sound familiar to you because that's something we really looked at with Oedipus the King or Oedipus Rex by Sophocles, was this idea of, are we in charge of our own fates? Do we have free will? That's something that you can especially, I think, consider for Frankenstein, and that's something I want you to consider as well, because as we are merging the identity of these characters here to parallel the identity of what it means to be human in general, to then parallel what it means for my own identity, it is that question of, what am I in charge of in terms of my own life and my own existence? So that's what you should be thinking about, just some examples as you are annotating your work. And the other thing I wanted to mention quickly was to always, I think it's best to always go ahead and print out all of your assignments for the week, or jot down whatever specific questions you know that the assignments are focusing on for the week. And then as you're reading Monday through Friday, you're annotating, looking for those specific answers to those questions. So that way, when you come back to the computer, say over the weekend, it's going to be super easy to pop in some of those answers to your work because you already have all the context here. And then hopefully that also helps with the fun, with the engagement, so that when you're actually doing the handwritten work, the typing the work into the actual course room, it's not as difficult because you have all of the context here, all the breadcrumbs that help lead you to that kind of deeper analysis in a sense. I also think that's how we have more fun as well, because I really want you guys to have fun while reading. I do want to just quickly talk about some of the key points of Frankenstein, but also just mentioning this is one of my all-time favorite books. I reread it every year with you guys, so I hope you guys enjoy it as well. I definitely think keeping in mind some of the context of the book helps to see some of the richness that's there. I feel like this is one of those books that you could reread every year and come up with something new. I know personally I do, but what helps with that depth is by looking at some of our foundational notes first, and these are the same notes that are posted in the module, but just a few things to keep in mind, because I do want you guys to remember, and this is something I say frequently as well, is that literature is history and history is literature. So it's important that we do know the history of where our works are coming from to help with the context or the parallel to real world in a sense. So do keep in mind that this text is coming to us from the Romantic time period, which roughly speaking would be about 1798 to about 1870 England. That time period would be following the Enlightenment time period of England, which was about 1700 to 1800, again, roughly speaking. But remember that the Enlightenment time period is the time period where we begin this kind of questioning of man, where this idea that I'm beginning to question some of the values of the society I'm embedded within. Um, this idea that man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains, right? I think that is kind of a key phrase for what's happening throughout this time period. Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. I think that parallels to not only Frankenstein and some of the things that we'll see there, but also to, again, current day society. I'm wondering what a phrase like that would look like to you in your world. But keep in mind that the Enlightenment time period would be a time period that we're really beginning to question or challenge some of the establishments happening around us, some of the social institutions that are oftentimes kind of controlling our lives in a sense. And we're starting to see this emphasis on the individual during the Enlightenment time period, more so than the ideals of a whole society as a whole. I'm moving away from some of those traditions and questioning some of those traditions, and instead thinking about what it means to be an actual individual, stressing really the importance of those authentic personal feelings. That then ties directly into the Romantic time period, like I said. Now, keep in mind that the Romantic time period, to us, when we hear the word romantic, we're thinking, lovey-dovey, roses, that sort of thing. That's not technically what the Romantic time period means in the sense of literature. The tone of that intimacy and love and intimate feeling, deep feeling, that somewhat parallels, but the Romantic time period is more about a time period where, again, we're focusing on those personal feelings, those authentic personal feelings, where I'm trying to see what it means to be an authentic human being and consider my own individuality and what's happening within my own self in a sense. That kind of ties into more of that Romantic time period, more of an overtly artistic expression. That also is going to parallel then Gothic fiction, which Frankenstein definitely parallels as well. Gothic fiction is something that focuses on this kind of mystery and suspense. There's kind of a darkness about it, a brooding about it. Usually there's some sort of paranormal happening. The setting is usually going to be, somewhere either off in the country or in some sort of castle or in a manor, something along kind of those kind of wilderness type of factors. But there's always this melodrama happening in it, always kind of these high emotions, which also interestingly parallels this idea of science fiction, which a lot of critics say that Frankenstein is actually oftentimes coined as our first science fiction novel. Um, and so this is more so dealing with this impact of kind of the imagined science upon society or individuals, whether it's imagined or whether it's a real impact or not. But it's this questioning of how does science impact the world we live in? And that's, again, one that you could explore in so many different ways, even today. Currently, one I'm thinking of is just human cloning has always been something that we're talking about on a scientific scale and, scale of morality as well. And that's something we can, really parallel over here to Frankenstein. But what I'm really kind of curious about, and these are always the questions I kind of note here in my notes, is this idea of why is Frankenstein so popular today, is what I'm always wondering. Again, it's a story that continues to fascinate. It's a story that we see in so many different genres and different frames today. And I'm wondering what it is about that would make it still so fascinating, so popular to today's mind. And I am maybe encouraging you to consider this idea of secrets, or this idea of things that are left unsaid, or this idea of how the unknown sometimes becomes this fascinating thing for humans in a sense. I think this questioning of discovery as well, because we see at the start of the novel how the character Walton, there with his letters, is trying to discover these new parts of the world. And again, something so um, common to us today of this idea of wanting to know everything and see everything and but is everything for our taking? And that's kind of the question that comes along with this novel. Is everything meant for our taking? I think that's something that comes up in this novel quite a bit. And the last thing that I do just want to note, and you'll see some of this also that I'm going to say here in our video that we're going to watch with one of our assignments this week, and that also parallels a lot of what's happening on the quiz this week as well. But I do want you to note the subtitle that goes along with Frankenstein. It's Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. And remember that Greek mythology ties into this kind of subtitle in the context. So keep in mind that Mary Shelley, she put that subtitle into her title for very specific reasons. And so we'd have to wonder, why is that? Why would she subtitle Frankenstein with the modern Prometheus? And then maybe just remembering that Prometheus was the bringer of fire, right? According to Greek mythology, he was the one that brought fire back to man, right? And took the torch from the sun. Remember how the torch took it to the sun, brought the fire back to man? That's with Greek mythology. But then he was punished for stealing, right, from the gods, because during, our Greek mythology time era, we would say that that fire, that knowledge, was only meant for gods. It wasn't meant for man. Man wasn't supposed to have that sort of knowledge, that sort of life. And so for Prometheus to do that, he was basically stealing from the gods, and he needed to be punished. And so it does end morbidly, as a lot of our Gothic and Greek mythology often does. But it ended with him being chained to a stone and ravens pecking out his eyes, which has an interesting parallel to Sophocles as well, with the idea of the dismemberment of the eyes in a sense. So there's all these interesting ironies and parallels, all these different things that we could say about Frankenstein. I just wanted to give you a little bit of context of some of the things that stand out to me the most. I'm super excited to hear what you guys think, though, and what's going to stand out to you guys as well. So again, when you're reading this, you're always trying to consider, what does this look like in my world? What do these themes look like in my world? If you're feeling lost with your analysis, go back to some of the announcements that I've posted this past week of just simply ask yourself, what does the writer want me to think or feel after I'm done reading this? What tone am I hearing? What theme am I hearing? But always back to that question of, I've read this thing, I'm feeling a little lost. The first breadcrumb is, what do I think Shelley wants me to feel? Or what am I feeling? What am I feeling after reading this? That's it. What do I feel? What image am I seeing in my head? Try to always consider the images that you're seeing in your head from some of the readings as well. So that's it for this week. Thank you guys for hearing me, and I hope you're enjoying the reading, and I'll chat with you guys soon. Thank you.